Hey folks, here's Charles Barkley bugging me this morning to play with him, but I'm here to talk about progressivism with you. So this is the video number 1, or part number 1 of progressivism. I know a lot of you had trouble last time keeping up with the pace of these videos as well as getting all of your notes done at the same time. I suggest that you write down the most important things that are being said, and oftentimes I will say things that are not directly on the slide. So sometimes my voice and what I'm saying is the most important thing, while other times the slide is. So please keep that in mind as you are listening to me and taking your notes. You should not, by any way, be taking these word for word. Okay, let's get started. So the first video that you're gonna watch is just an introduction to progressivism. How did it get to be a thing, and what were the progressives? So we need to do a really quick review here. We just finished our unit on industrialization, and some of the effects of industrialization were urbanization, which connects to bad living conditions, those tenements, and bad working conditions. Also, monopolies as a result of industrialization. This is when one company controls the entire industry. So, for instance, if I owned Coca-Cola and I bought Pepsi and I bought Fanta, then I would be the only person selling pop. If I'm the only person selling pop, I have no competition against me to make me lower my wages, higher my wages or lower my prices. Laissez-faire economics is something that we didn't do too hot on the unit test for industrialization. Remember, and this may be important for you to write down because most of you did not get this correct on the test. Laissez-faire economics is when the government is completely hands-off. You need to think hands-off of business, okay? The government believes that the economy works best when it does not interfere, okay? You need to know that. So all of these things here, urbanization, monopolies, laissez-faire, bad living conditions, and bad working conditions, kind of created this progressivism. And I've got this big star here for you because progressivism is a huge concept that you will have to know. These are mostly middle-class, urban, educated people. Some progressives are muckrakers, which we're going to talk about, and then a lot of like educators and social workers. That middle-class social atmosphere is mostly progressives. They said that the government needs to play a bigger role in solving society's problems. Now, if you think about this, the government wasn't doing anything about bad living conditions. It took a lot for the government to do something about bad working conditions. Laissez-faire economics is where the government has no say in the economy at all. The government tried to pass the Sherman Antitrust Act for monopolies, but it was not that successful. So they say, because of all of this stuff over here, our government needs to be much more involved in helping people succeed. But they also argued that the government was so bad itself that it had to be reformed first before it could help people in society. So, the first progressives were populists. You need to know the term populist. Populist, populist, populist. I put a big star, yellow star around it. Populism is important. Populists are farmers. You need to know that populists were farmers. After the Civil War, they were having a lot of trouble making money due to monopolies and trusts. And think about our robber barons controlling the railroad and the steel industries. Okay, so they created this political movement because they wanted to make changes for themselves, for farmers. You do need to know the term Farmers Alliance. I don't know if it'll let me highlight this. It won't. But right here, it says Farmers Alliance. That's important too. Oops. So you need to know that the Farmers Alliance comes first, okay? The populist movement comes second, and the progressive movement becomes third, okay? So, Farmers Alliance, populists, progressives. I hope you wrote those down in order. Now, the populists were formed out of this Farmers Alliance called the Grange, and they decided that instead of just trying to be influential in general, that they had to move specifically into politics. They hated the Republicans and the Democrats, which is a common belief today, because they thought that the Republicans and Democrats only cared about big businesses and industries and banks. They didn't think that the government cared about the normal, everyday person like them, the farmer. So here is a political cartoon that came out of this time period. You can see at the top it says from 1776 to 1876 here. This is obviously a farmer right here in the middle, and he says, "I feed you all." And around the corners we have different jobs. This man says, "I plead for you all," and this man says, "I rule for you all." So this is a lawyer and a judge. This guy has a railroad in the background. It says, "I carry for all." So this is probably a railroad owner. This one says, "I rule and bear for all." So this is another type of specific courtroom duty. Says general brokerage, and it says, "I fleece for you all." What that really means is that he's supplying money. This guy is a doctor. So this one is a shop owner. "I buy and sell for you all." "I sail." So this guy owns ships. And here we have a soldier and a priest. "I fight for all and I preach for all." So you should take a second to think about, why is this farmer central in the middle of this cartoon saying, "I feed you all"? What's the main argument being said here? Okay, so the populists, which are those farmers, they wanted to do a few things, and a platform is just a belief system that you try to push on politicians to give your support. So the populists wanted to get rid of or abolish national banks, so that way the government couldn't influence banking as much. They wanted a graduated income tax, and they wanted to coin silver to make sure that the money was solid. They wanted to directly elect senators, which wasn't being done at this time period. They were in favor of an 8-hour workday. They wanted the government to control the railroad, telegraph, and telephone companies. They were mostly affected by this because the railroad monopoly created really terrible conditions for them to sell and move their crops. And then lastly, they wanted immigration restrictions. So the populists did not want new people. Again, I've got another political cartoon here for you. It says, "Republican Party, builders of corporate wealth." So you can tell that the populists believed that the Republican Party was only there for corporations. And then it says, "Democratic Party, builders of saloons and jails." So you can kind of try to think to yourself, what is a saloon, which is a bar, and a jail? What kind of idea does that bring about? And then here in the middle is the People's Party, which is those populists. And it says, "Builders of churches and schools." So again, I want you to think about the main argument being given to you in this political cartoon. Okay, so how did all of this take shape, though? I mean, how were people knowing that the government needed reformed? How were people knowing that businesses were taking advantage of monopolies? So they knew because of these muckrakers. So muckrakers are very, very important for you to know. Ida Tarbell and Charles Edward Russell, that is this woman and this man. They were journalists that uncovered the unfair practices of large corporations. Number 2, we have Jacob Riis. Many of you learned about him during your project. Here he is. And here's a photograph that he took of a man that was living in a cellar for 4 years. This is where he slept for 4 years. He exposed the poverty, disease, crime, pollution, poor living conditions in tenements, and the lives that immigrants had to live once they got to the U.S. And then lastly, we have Lincoln Steffens. He reported on corrupt political practices like vote stealing. So we'll talk more about that later. Ida B. Wells is the last muckraker that I'm going to discuss with you. Here she is here, and she was an incredible woman. She was a journalist and an activist, and she led an anti-lynching movement in the U.S. during this time period. If you don't know what lynching is when a group of common everyday people typically take justice into their own hands. This was primarily targeting African Americans that were accused of things that they didn't actually do. And this was a way to kind of keep them in their place when African Americans were actually gaining more rights during the time period. So the white people were typically really scared about this and attempting to keep their power if they could. So a lot of times they would grab accused men and women out of jail cells or out of their homes, and they would viciously torture and kill them. Lynching oftentimes ended up with them hanging the person that they were lynching, and usually the whole town would show up to see. So, as you can imagine, this is utterly awful, gruesome, and terrible. So Ida B. Wells really exposed the racism that was still happening in the United States in both the North and the South. This was not only in the South. So here you can see a picture of a public lynching, and you can see this man is obviously very proud. He's pointing his finger. These people are holding hands like they're on a date. It was a disgusting, disgusting practice. So she spoke out against that, and she also founded her own newspaper. So if you can, I'm not sure if you can get to this video or not, but if you can, I want you to watch this video about Ida B. Wells and her anti-lynching. Okay, the last thing is just what are progressives? So we've got the Farmers Alliances moved to the Populists and now the Progressives. So they focus on economic, political, and social reforms through government, just like the Populists did. They targeted three things: political corruption, ills of urbanization, so these are like living conditions and working conditions, as well as industrial capitalism. So what I mean when I say industrial capitalism are these three things. You need to know what industrial capitalism means. Laissez-faire economics is when the government keeps hands off of business activities. They do not regulate. Monopolies and trusts. I told you the definition of that earlier. And just overall big businesses influencing government. Okay, so you should stop right here and answer the prompts on your guided notes. Make sure to get my stamp when you're done.